Welcome back to Third Academy's Metaverse Campus. My name is Rita, and I'm the community manager at Third Academy. And today, as always, we have a very interesting guest and a very interesting topic that we'll be talking about today on how you can land your dream Web3 job. And we have Molly, a talent acquisition manager at Journee. This is actually the second edition of this topic that we're having, right? This is the bear market edition. We've had Molly in the past in one of our Twitter spaces, and trust me, that was one of the best performing spaces that we had in the past. And when I reached out to Molly to see if she'd be willing to join us to talk about what has changed, and how, as this industry is evolving, how you can building a career for yourself in the long term, what to do, what not to do, what is the demand, right, in this space. And today we have a lot of interesting things that we're going to talk about, and Molly would take us through that journey. To get started, Molly, do you want to start by introducing yourself, and let's get to meet you.
Yeah, sure. And first of all, I find it so funny that with all the options we had of clothing, we were matching. But yeah, thanks for having me so much.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really excited to be back, and I was reflecting how there actually has been, quite a lot of changes since the last time I was here. But yeah, I'm Molly. I'm a talent acquisition manager at Journee, which is an immersive tech company. We're based in Berlin, but we are remote first. So I'm actually living in Canada, where I'm from at the moment. And yeah, I started my career not in recruitment, but I transitioned into recruitment about almost 10 years ago now. I've worked as a recruiter in the tech space and also in the Web3 space. So yeah, and actually with Journee, what's unique about my experience with them here is that I focus a lot on the creative roles. So hiring creative directors, art directors, 3D artists, which are such an important part of this industry, and just something like the space that we're sitting in. How does this get created? So I hire a lot of people that are kind of a part of the making of spaces like this, and also learning and development. So that's really a passion of mine too, is getting more involved with our own personal and professional development and education throughout our time. So yeah, that's a little bit of my background.
Wow, that's very interesting. And I think that there will be so much value that will be shared here today, based on like your experience and from your background. And some of the things that we're going to cover today, includes, like, we're going to talk about like the demand, right, when it comes to Web3 jobs, tech versus non-tech. We're also going to talk about hiring, right? What are some of the red flags that hiring managers look for, and how you should avoid those red flags? We talk about the role of education and what skill that sets you up for success in Web3 and in your career. So if you have any question, let's say it's a personal question concerning like a Web3 journey, how you're trying to land a job, you have questions, you want to know like best advice, we're going to have time at the end of the space. So just have your questions down, and you have the opportunity to ask Molly all of your questions today and have your doubts cleared. To get started with the first question that I have for Molly is today, to talk about like trends, right? We know that Web3 is evolving, and a lot of things are changing, right? A lot of things has changed from the last time that we had you to this time, not even from the last time, from when you have been in the space, in the tech role, like in the Web3 space and in the tech space, a lot has changed, right? So, what would you say are some of the trends that you see in, Web3 job markets right now?
Yeah. Um, the first thing that kind of popped into mind is just because it is a focus for us right now. And I've kind of been in client meetings where I've also heard it discussed so much, and that is roles regarding strategy, which is almost like its own little department in and of itself, but business strategy is becoming so important because at the end of the day, this is really getting this type of technology. It's getting picked up a lot more. People are kind of on board now. We know that it's here to stay, and it's all about, well, what do we do with it, and why are we going to engage in this? And so coming to the table with the ideas of why would we want to get involved, what is the actual strategy, and how would this industry apply to, what is the Web3 strategy, for instance. These types of roles are really, really at the top of everyone's demand list right now. And what I find, even to go further into that, is niching. So because, and we'll get more into it, but Web3 is such a broad, term, and there's so many facets within it. And I think, the more that you can niche down, for instance, like an example, when I speak about the strategy roles, we're looking specifically for someone for strategy just in the automotive industry versus someone for strategy just to deal with fashion brands. So it's like really getting industry specific, rather than more broad roles, which I think was a big transition that we've seen as the whole industry has matured. And then lastly, I guess just location. I think new geographical locations are really popping up at the forefront, and like the big one for us right now, and just what I see and hear about a lot, is what's going on in Dubai, and how big the engagement is, and how kind of advanced they are with all of these different technologies as well, and how they're really embracing it.
Interesting. And what would you say? What would you say is the breakdown between like tech and non-tech roles in Web3? Are you seeing like any change in this demand?
Yeah, it's hard to say because again, I'm gonna speak more about my experience that I see
Okay.
firsthand, and that is
Mm-hmm.
definitely a shift towards more non-tech roles. I think
Right.
it's almost like the maturity of, a lot of these platforms and different tools were created, and there was such a heavy focus on the building and the tech that goes behind and supports it. But now, as these various companies and initiatives mature, it's almost like the companies themselves are maturing with the development of new departments and more standardized things that we see, obviously, with all companies in Web 2, but just, more like marketing and content, and really getting like thought leadership. I see this as really big roles and key roles to really help get all these companies that just got started with amazing tech teams, but now they have to really get themselves out there. And so I have seen a lot more non-tech roles in the space for sure.
Interesting. And being a non-tech, being someone that is in the non-tech role, what skill would you say would set you up for success?
And so I think this is where I
Mm-hmm.
still say it's very transferable. It's not like these skills are being created out of thin air just to be applied to
Mm-hmm.
Web3. But I think, in Web3, especially, just the ability to be very adaptable, to be, very open minded, the more that you can kind of pivot and transition and be in a role and then know, like, hey, we gotta move quickly in this direction. The ability to be very adaptable, be able to work under fast paced, conditions. I find this is really needed in Web3 because it does move so fast, and not everyone is comfortable with that, and or even wants to work within spaces like that. But being yeah, and really just kind of constantly open minded, constantly having that mindset of a beginner, because as much as we, are kind of positioning ourselves as experts in these niche areas, every single day we have to be open to learning something completely new. And so just having, a very open mind, very adaptable ability to work in a fast paced environment, being able to
Mm-hmm.
change and not really holding tight. Like if you have this set way of doing something, being really okay with completely scrapping it and going in a different direction. Those types of just kind of, soft skills in a way, I find are really applicable and useful.
Very interesting. I think, just to talk more like on being adaptable, I think that skill is, if you want to thrive in the space, it's important that you learn how to be, because sometimes your Web 2 background, it's not a limiting factor, right? As long as
No.
you can be a direct, because I know someone who, she's from an engineering background, and right now she works like in marketing and in communities, like for NFT projects. As to the brand that she's also working with, and I think up a lot for environment. I think fast. You need to be able to, like, be able to keep up with the news, with the updates, with the technology, with macro and even with micro, right? So you need to be able to keep up to date, else it's easy to feel left behind, and you don't know what's happening in the space. Wow, those are really great points that you have mentioned. And the last question that I have based on demands is, for people who are looking to like land their dream Web3 job, right? So what are some of the places that they can keep an eye on? What are some of like best channels and platforms to find these job offers? Is it like job is it like job sites, or is it best to use LinkedIn or X? Or in your opinion, what do you think are like the best channels for someone to find like jobs?
Yeah, this is a really interesting one because when I first started, um, I was doing my own research as a recruiter of where do we post job ads. And,
Mhm.
I came to the table with all these ideas because I had discovered Web3 job boards, like these websites that existed just for Web3 jobs. And I thought this was like all cutting edge, but I really think it's not like those places aren't any better than just LinkedIn. I think the biggest thing is we just spoke about having to keep up with, you know, news and updates. And I think doing that in and of itself, you might not think you are job hunting, but you are. So every time you read an article, if a company is mentioned in that article, then go to their website and see if they're hiring. Any posts you see, any like co-founders, any sort of mention of a company, I think that's really cool because it kind of, it makes it engaging. You can then, you have an interest, and then you could even use what you've read when you reach out to them as a talking point and showing that you've actually paid attention to what they're doing. So just know that, yes, as you're reading and educating yourself, keeping an eye on the companies being mentioned, the up and coming startups and tech tools out there, just go to their website and see what's happening there, or LinkedIn. I really think when we started in this space, it wasn't so heavy LinkedIn. It really was Twitter or X. And um, I think more of that traditional of like LinkedIn being the go-to place has really come back around as a focal point for us. But I think we get more applications through our own website. So I would just say, as you do your research, as you come across really cool companies, just check out their website and see their first and foremost what are they hiring for, and always feel free. Like we get these types of applications often. Some we don't have this as an open invite on our website, but I do see some companies offering it. And if there's nothing that you could apply to, still reach out. You never know. Sometimes we have roles that are confidential that we don't actually publicly put out there. So always, if you're really passionate about that company, still sending an email where you see any sort of contact, because you never know. Or it just establishes that connection, and maybe they reach out to you when they go to hire again. So yeah, I really think even, with all the different tools and platforms, website and LinkedIn is like really just simple, but I think effective.
Interesting. Just listening to you, I never really like paid attention to, like brands that have like open roles in their website, because I feel like if they're hiring, like they need to I feel like job boards are where they put out this application. But now that you've mentioned it, I think it's and for everyone who's listening, it's good to pay attention to that. And you never really know. And Molly also mentioned for let's say for instance you see a company that you're interested in, that you would like to work with, and they don't have a role that that has a tag, right, that has your tag to it, for instance. And also feel free to apply, right? Also feel free to
Hmm.
apply. You never really know if they're in need of what you have to offer. And also you also mentioned LinkedIn. And I think LinkedIn is slowly gaining ground, like for like Web3 users, right? Especially with
Yeah,
professional networking, right? Because I know it used to be X. X has always like been like the king of
yeah,
like
yeah,
building your brand and everything. But LinkedIn is also coming up and making a name for itself in like the
yeah,
Web3 community. And I think we still have like the early movers advantage as Web3 users to make the best use of like LinkedIn in professional networking and getting jobs and every other thing that comes with that. Well, thank you so
yeah.
much.
I think it
um
is. Oh, sorry. I was going to comment. Like, I think that
no,
is
no
in and of
problem.
itself, that's kind of the maturity we're seeing of the entire industry, is that it really started as
Mm-hmm.
this like grassroots, like one-on-one conversations, community, like that
Right.
really tight, close knit feel on what was Twitter. But with LinkedIn, you're finding like that's where I get most of my information. And I would say definitely just follow. Like, you don't need to connect with people, but follow thought leaders and what are these people saying. And it's just kind of I really love like the thought leadership. And what I love on LinkedIn is that you can get a lot of different opinions. And sometimes I
Opinions.
read,
Right.
yeah, I
Mm-hmm.
read through the comments, and just because one person is saying something about a trend in this industry, someone else in the
Mm-hmm.
comments might say something completely different. And I think it's very
Different.
good, yeah, for you
Yeah.
to get a really
Mm-hmm.
big scope of what's
Yeah.
out there, because we are really in a lucky position where we're all still learning as we go. And
Mm-hmm.
the more people you can be exposed to that have their own background and thoughts and ideas, the better. And I think it helps you establish your own passion and take an area that you want to focus your career on.
Right, right, right. Thank you. Thank you for that. Okay, so quickly, I want us to like talk a bit on like hiring, um, because I think that's very important, right?
Yeah.
That's also very important, right? And I know like with like your background and like your experience, right? You've worked not only in Web3, you've also worked like in Web2, and you have that experience. So in your opinion, what would you say has changed, right? What changes in when it comes to hiring? What changes in Web3 for professionals? Is it like the hiring process or the payment method, or is it the work modality? What, in your opinion, would you say is changing or has changed?
Yeah. Well, I'd mentioned it when I came into this space when I first arrived. And that
Mm-hmm.
is, we are ourselves, and we're seeing a lot of interest from other companies that are wanting to do their interviews in spaces like this. So, recruitment in the metaverse, recruitment in these virtual spaces, I see, like, I don't think anyone's doing it full on. Well, definitely people are experimenting it. We've experimented. We've had some interviews in spaces like this. There's pros and cons, and I think you have to do it for specific roles. And at some point, meeting that person face to face is still going to have, an impact. But what you always spoke, what I was speaking about when I first walked into the space was just about how it really is one of the best ways that we can do a recruitment process, eliminating bias. So that is a big thing I've seen with the complete overhaul and change of a potential recruitment process, is that it might begin in spaces like this, which I think is really cool. And then other things, I guess, again, just kind of referencing what we're doing, and maybe it makes sense, is that we're doing a lot more due diligence in terms of asking applicants to do things and complete tasks, or, because there was a lot of talk and a lot of hype, and can you walk your talk? If you say you have experience doing something, can
Yeah.
you actually do it? Because we all, everyone is putting their best foot forward, but in this space specifically, because everything is so new, do they
Mm-hmm.
actually have experience doing that? So
Right.
our processes have become a little bit more thorough in terms of really testing and like giving case studies or asking assignments, just to really see capabilities, because we really want to just make sure, because I think at the beginning it was just all excitement and so much talk, and you really have to get to the nitty gritty, especially in this industry.
It's one thing to say you can do something, and it's another thing to be able to do that. Right. That's very correct. And that further explain the fact that you need to also aside from if you're just coming into the space, your priority should not really be in like getting a job, right? You need to understand the space, understand how things work, understand what your passions are, and what are your strengths. When you get the opportunity to work for a project, what can you actually bring to the table, right? And just to like also underscore that point, recently we just finished a in this virtual space, we just finished a 5 weeks community management class. And one of the tests that we actually did for like the students was like a case study, right? So we give them a case
Yeah,
study. So let's say, for instance, you're working for a brand that wants to launch a new application. As a community manager, right, how would you encourage product adoption, right? How would you create like a buzz in the community?
yeah,
What kind of content would you put out? How would you promote it? How would you incentivize the
yeah,
community, right? So yeah, I think those things are actually very important. And it's good to
yeah,
see that these case studies are just a way to like assess the applicant's skill and their knowledge, if they're able to if when they come on board, because no project will pay you to come on board and do nothing, right? They're paying you to
yeah.
come and do
And I
something for the
think,
project.
yeah, like, and that's with the industry being new, is that sometimes we can speak to things that we have built in the past, or, a
Mm-hmm.
community that might have managed in the past. And it's like, well, I can't speak to that because I haven't yet done it. But that's where it gets difficult. But yeah, case studies are so important. And just the ideas that you have, like really,
You're right.
um, more ideas that you can give to that company, that's going back to that strategy again, like it's these pieces of like, why are we doing this and how are we going to do this, that we really need like hand holding as we help people move into this space, and like, why would they move into this space? And the more that you
Mhm.
can bring your own ideas, I think are great.
Good point. Good point. Good point. And what would you say? What would you say are some of like the red flags that hiring managers look out for in Web3 job
Yeah,
candidates, so we can
it's
stay away
always
from that?
it's always hard, because red flags are kind of red flags regardless. But I
Mm-hmm.
think almost casting the net too wide, because sometimes I see resumes that are like Web3, AI, crypto, DeFi, and they have all these keywords, and that's great. But I think, focus on one thing, because sometimes we don't know. Like, sometimes what will happen in our recruitment process is I might get an application that doesn't quite fit what I am looking for, but I would say to my fellow recruiters, hey, here's someone that is really skilled in X, could you use them? So getting really specific rather than putting all these keywords. And I see that a lot on LinkedIn, especially now that we can use just keywords underneath our profiles, which makes us more searchable, which is great. But not going too broad, I guess I would say. And then, this is such a fine line to walk, but that beginner's mindset of really, whenever if an applicant is saying they are the expert in this, or, that's always a bit of like, oh, because no one can really consider themselves that yet. And I know that we
Mm-hmm.
want to be confident and really speak, with conviction of what we know, but just having a little bit of humbleness as you describe what you're doing. And then also, this is really simple, but I still come across it, which it surprises me. And that is, you want to have a genuine interest in the space. And I think that most people do. But I still have so many interviews where there's a lot of skepticism still brought up. And for me, that's just kind of like negativity. So stay, not kind of saying, oh, I still don't believe in this, but I think I'm gonna like jump on the hype, or I just want to kind of see what it's like. But really believing that this is the future, and really
Right.
coming across with that optimism rather
Mm-hmm.
than negativity, or how volatile the markets can be, and kind of going into kind of all of those things. Yeah, I don't know if it's because people want to question me on what I think, but I find like, they'll play devil's advocate. I'm thinking, well, I don't think this is the future. Or I don't think this is just hype for now. But yeah, staying more optimistic about this, because you want to obviously have like that genuine passion and
For the space.
belief. Because if you're working for a company that's all in and going in a certain direction, you want to make sure that you agree with that. And I guess this is a little bit of offside, but you know, knowing what your values are and being true to that, and then like, when the right match comes, it's such a better and
It's
enjoyable fit for
easy.
you. So yeah,
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, I think that it really should be an enjoyable ride if you have that belief for the space, and and you're working for a project that you're genuinely interested in, not just for the
yeah,
sake of having a job, quote unquote, not just for the sake of having a job, but because you believe in what they're doing, and you want to contribute, right? That is your own way of contributing to the success. Well, that's a very good catch. That's a very good point. And you also mentioned casting the net too wild. I think I've also, with my little experience that I have, I've also, seen this a lot. People just, want to fit it all into the
yeah,
resume, what they do without leaving any skills out, right? I think sometimes that can cause more harm than good, right? Because if you're applying for like a specific role, you need to show that you have the skill for that role, right? So
yeah.
what would your advice be in that case? Would it be to have like different resumes for like these different skills, and apply with those resumes, or what? Let's say for someone who has a variety of skill, and they don't want to leave any of those out, so what would
Yeah.
your advice be? Would it be to create like
Yeah,
different
I
resume,
do.
or what?
I know it's so time consuming, and I remember doing it myself when I was back on the job hunt, but I really do think it's worth it to customize a resume, and specifically a cover letter to that role. Especially if your LinkedIn remains broad, because with all of our experiences being up there for the public to see, it's going to be broad. And,
Right.
that just happens, and people jump around, and I've done lots of different things. So that's quite normal. So if I take a quick look at your LinkedIn, okay, let me understand why she or he wants to actually apply for this job. I'm going to take the time to read. And so if you can just make it clear of like, this is why, these are my skills that apply to this actual job, or this is what I think are transferable skills. You could even acknowledge, I might not have this, but this is why I think that I could, be useful in this, because my skills would be applicable here as well. So yeah, having some, especially for jobs you're very interested in, like just not putting out those blanket resumes. But yeah, I guess for LinkedIn, it's quite common that it's going to remain quite broad. But I will often take the time to read a cover letter when I don't see the exact match and I'm questioning, why have they applied for this? But I will try to understand why. And I think, a lot of recruiters will, if they're taking the time to do that. Yeah.
Okay, and then looking like from the eyes of like a recruiter, from your own perspective as a recruiter, what would you say like is the biggest challenge in looking for like Web3 talents?
Oh, that's hard. I think we're very lucky at the moment. I must say, compared to past roles I've had as a recruiter, the interest is often there, which I'm very grateful for. I think there's still this bit of, especially if I'm looking on LinkedIn for people that haven't actively applied, um, there's still a lot of people that are consider a move to Web3 risky. So just kind of, that is always a challenge for us. It's also a very, very competitive market. I'm finding more and more. So, um, I think a lot of Web3 companies are now scouring very top talent at any company. So the demand is there for sure. So just it's a competitive market for us right now. It's not just like there's a few key players, there's a lot. And I think that the people that we are looking for are also better educated, and they know what they want as well. So yeah, I think, but overall, I would say we're very lucky if we're in this space at the moment. Um, to think of other things. I have my own kind of things that are unique to the art world. It's actually improved a lot. I think it would have been much more when I first started, when NFTs were like huge and we were trying to hire talented 3D artists. A lot of them didn't want to take jobs because they were making so much money on their own with their NFT projects. And so now, with kind of the swing of that, I've noticed there's more interest from artists that are looking to actually take on a salaried role rather than working for themselves. So that's a plus. It's not a challenge. So, but that's just like a change I've seen.
Well, it's good to know that the demand is still there for like Web3 talents.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you're hearing the sound of my voice, we're live at the Third Academy's Metaverse campus, and we have Molly. Um, and I think she's done a fantastic job so far, like with the advice, with the practical advice that she's giving to us. And I personally, I've been able to grab some points for myself that are very useful. And if you're just joining us late, whether you're listening on from Twitter or you're watching us on YouTube, you can always come back to the space, right? You can always come back to the space and catch up with what we have been talking about, since we've talked about the demand, the trends, the breakdown, and as a non-tech professional, what skill will set you up for success, especially if you're interested in building your career and landing your dream Web3 job. But we've also talked about hiring, right? So what changes in Web3 for you as a professional, right? What are some of the red flags to avoid? And one of the red flags that Molly mentioned was, casting the net too wide, right? You want to niche down and make sure that if you're applying for a job, the skill, match for that job and the experience also matches. And we always talked about, like what are some of the biggest challenge, as a recruiter looking for talent. And good news, Molly just told us that there's a demand for Web3 talent. So if you're sure of what you can do and how much value you can bring to the space, of course, I'm sure there's a project out there willing to bring you on board and have you you know um contribute. And now we're quickly going to, if you have any questions, feel free. If it's on Twitter, on YouTube, put it on the chat, and it will get to us and ask me your question. Now, to move on to the role of education, right? The role of education, mentioned in the beginning that one of the skills that will set you up for success is adaptability, right? You be able to adapt, as the space is evolving, which is very important. Now, to move on to the role of education, Molly, what would you recommend to learn when pursuing a career in Web3?
The first thing that comes to mind, just because I just had a conversation with someone about this, which I'll speak about, but really educating yourself on how to use AI tools. I don't think we haven't really touched upon AI yet. I guess that's the biggest development that there's been since I was last here about a year ago. And that is really, and one of the things that I always advise if you want to get into Web3 is really getting your hands dirty, like using some of the tools, going on Discord, creating a wallet, like doing all the actual getting your hands dirty, practical steps to just get experience, whether you go in that certain direction or not. But really becoming comfortable using the various AI tools out there. And I had a conversation with someone recently. He was a new hire for us coming from the Fabricant. And Fabricant is like such a cool company for me. I think it's such a interesting industry. I love fashion. I think it's so cool what they do. And was telling him that I had always wanted to learn how to create digital clothing myself. And he was saying, you could go and learn it, but he's like, soon it will simply be AI, like doing these things. So really, and I know that's vast and there's so much to explore there, but taking a little piece and trying each day. Are you using, ChatGPT, for instance, get used all the time, but how are you using these tools day to day? And even I'm like guilty of this. I need to implement more of it. But I think that in and of itself will just, yeah, it's so important to be using these types of tools and educating ourselves on it. I'm seeing even more artists submitting portfolios that are a mix of their own work and AI generated work. But yeah, I'm not sure if that helps at all, but I would be even curious to know, like, how your community is taking advantage of these tools, because yeah, it's moving fast and it's at our disposal, and we might as well like use it while it's there.
Interesting. And for professionals coming from Web2 with the skills that they have, what do you think could be improved on to to fit in with like the culture of the space and blend in with everything?
Oh, I think that it's just kind of reiterating a lot of what we've spoken about. Like, really, it's going to probably move a lot faster. And just being up for the challenge, really being okay starting from scratch, even maybe being
Mm,
okay with having to take a few steps back, whether that be in
right.
your seniority or pay level. Doing kind of, really ready to give it a shot, and knowing like it's going to be hard, it's going to be a challenge, but knowing wherever you are in your career, that's what you want as a next step, because it might not be easy, it's not going to be what you're used to, but really being okay with throwing yourself outside your comfort zone. And you know like I said, being okay with making that little bit of a sacrifice at the start to kind of further ahead your career in the long run. Not everyone has an interest, and that's okay, but I think if you're wanting to make that transition, that kind of sometimes comes along with it.
Hmm. Being able to start from scratch, I think that hits me,
Yeah,
right? Because I think it can be you just have to be okay with that. I mean, you just have to be, especially when you're coming into the space, like learning. You had like so many years of experience in your Web2 role, and
right.
you're so badass and you're so good, and then coming into the space feeling like you don't know nothing, like you don't know anything, and then you have to learn about how each of these things work. I mean, you just have to be okay with that if you're willing to, if you are interested in building a career. Because in our community, I've had so many people come in and say, "Oh, I've worked in this role, I've worked in the government, I've worked in this, in my Web2 role, I've worked for 10 years, and now I'm willing to transition into Web3. Like,
Yeah.
where can I start from? Like, where
What
can I start from?"
what I would actually also touch upon there is that whatever industry you're coming from, whether it be
Mm-hmm.
education, entertainment, music, like the whatever the industry is in you're in and you want to make this transition, first think like, how will my industry be impacted by this tech?
Right.
Because that alone is your experience. Like, you already could be an expert in, the automotive industry, and now you just
Mm-hmm.
need to learn, okay, how is Web3 going to disrupt this? How could, and you could bring in the
Right.
knowledge of the general industry into the
Yeah.
Web3 company. So again, it's kind of touching upon this niche thing, but I'm seeing more and more like we're wanting to hire people that come from vast experience in a specific, whether it be music, whether it be sporting, environment, just like even more industrial things. But just because you worked in that segment, which doesn't seem like a Web3 company, it's gonna have some sort of touch point with Web3 technology at some point. So you knowing that industry better than most people, how is it gonna like impact you, and kind of use that as a way in, or where you might see where you could be of value. I'm not sure if that helps, but
Yeah, yeah, I think that could actually help to have like a smooth transition. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. So we're almost at, we have just a few more minutes, and then we would entertain questions if we have any. Just to talk a bit about, being a woman in Web3, right? So do you think that it's more challenging to find a job in Web3 being a woman, right? Or is it easier
yeah.
for like non-tech roles? What's your opinion on that? What would it be?
No, I think the playing field is pretty fair at the moment. I absolutely like, I'm seeing more and more. I know that it's still, I'm referring to creatives, but especially 3D artists that coming from the gaming industry, like I'm seeing way more young women, which has been so amazing and so inspiring. Um, and I think with the general trend of us seeing more non-tech roles, yeah, I think it's more equal playing ground than I've felt that it's been in a while. But no, I don't think that we as women have an extra challenge ahead of us by any means.
So it's a plain field.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, good to know that. So yes, do we have anyone who has any question? If you have any question,
Yeah.
now's your chance. You can unmute and ask. All right.
Hey, Rita, I have a question.
Okay.
Hey, Molly. So far, really good talk. I have a question for you about proof of people's capabilities. Would it help? I know I'm with Third Academy, and would it help to have either a soul-bound NFT or a POAP that shows people's level of involvement in
Yeah,
growth?
I would say it could never hurt. Like, I would find that as a recruiter really interesting. I know when I was hired with Journee, I don't know if they cared, but I wanted to talk about how I had just created my own NFT project. Like, I just played around with it. I never sold a single thing, but I wanted to kind of show them like I actually went through the whole process. So yeah, anything that you have like as a result is so valuable, and the right people will value that.
Yeah, it's also seems strange. Maybe a little bit older than most in the Web3 world, but the in the in the olden days, we would look for a minimum of 4, 5, 6 years of experience in a company or in a
Right.
particular position. And now, if there's a resume with more than a year and a half experience, that looks like, what are you doing? How come you're not looking for new opportunities or learning some of the new skills? So it's
Yeah,
like flipped on its head.
that's a really good point. I also think, yeah, age like is such an interesting thing here, because we see a wide range, but yes, like there's a lot of young people, and not to let that discourage you by any means. And also knowing that in a way, it levels the playing ground a lot when you might look at resumes where someone has 4 or 5 years experience or 7 years, but then they have, 1 or a few months experience with something applicable to Web3. That stands for a lot. So it's not about this long tenure in a specific industry. It could just be showing you have an interest, or I did this one project, or I took this one course, and that holds a lot of weight more than like multiple years in a role. At least I would view that, because no one's going to have that much experience coming into this. I remember with the very first recruiting job I had in Web3, I was like kind of freelancing for an NFT platform, and they were hiring a marketing director. And I asked the guy, how many years experience are you looking for? And he didn't even care, because he's like, no one's actually going to have marketing experience doing this specific thing. So yeah, in a way, it's better, but I understand where you're coming from.
Thank you.
All right. I don't know if you have any other question. But while we're waiting for that, if you have any question, feel free to unmute if you're in the space and ask, or wherever you're listening from. Um, Molly, do you have like any advice for Web3 job seekers, right? So advice, recommendation, what is the role of building a personal brand, and any final words that you want to share?
So much pressure. I don't know. I would just say I always just want to like empower whoever is listening or attending, because you probably are way further ahead than you think. When we're in this industry, and I feel this way often, is I can get really quickly overwhelmed and feel like kind of defeated of like, how can I keep up with this information? How can I possibly know what's like so cutting edge? And you can kind of get down on yourself, and just this feeling of constant overwhelm. But just take little bits at a time, but know, like, just by attending something like this, being in Third Academy, you are so far ahead of like 90% of people applying for jobs, because this is rare in and of itself. And as mature and as much as things have grown, it's still early on. And if you talk to probably, a lot of people in your network and friends and family, most people still are not fully immersed in this. And so you really are ahead, and to be confident in that, and to really feel empowered, because when we are in this position, sometimes we see like how daunting the road is ahead of us. And just to really just always come back to the fact that you have a lot more information and resources at your disposal than most people. And the fact that you're just passionate is, something that is just an intangible that you really need to use, and let that help you. But yeah, just things that I guess to cover. I'm trying to think of main topics, like the niching down, trying things out, really getting your hands dirty. We didn't really speak about it. I remember last time I spoke at length about it was reaching out within the community to make connections, but it also kind of, when I was really new to this space, I wasn't even recruiting yet. I just wanted to segue into it. I thought community manager was a role I'd never heard of. I didn't know what they did really. So I asked someone on Twitter if they would speak to me, and they did. And I just understood what she was doing in her day to day. So just, there's no harm in just trying. You might not get an answer from everyone, but you never know how those little phone calls might impact your career, or what direction that takes you in. So just, yeah, it's still valuable within this space to reach out and build community and take advantage of the community around you. And yeah, little by little, I always say I'm going to do this, and I don't, but I always think, maybe if I just set aside like an hour a week just to read through, because sometimes they get so daunting, but really keeping up on education and somehow using AI tools, I think is as we move forward and try to stay on top of things.
Wow, thank you very much. That's a very practical advice. I hope that if you're listening, you're able to implement all that Molly has said, because you only get results when you implement these things, right? I think we just before we go, we have one question from YouTube and from Alabi that says, for a community manager or other professionals who have no prior experience, do you think having a case study, is enough to showcase your skill? Do you think that's good for the candidate?
Yeah, I do. I think it's, you know, I just know there's some instances where we as recruiters might go through a lot of in-depth stuff looking at someone's background, but when I introduce you to someone, um, they really will only look at the case study.
Mm-hmm.
They trust us as recruiters that we have, felt this person was a good fit. And if when it gets to those stages, it's all about just kind of those results. And they're not going to look so much into all of your experience, but they just want to see, fresh ideas and effort. But yeah, the use of case studies is so, I think, really helpful.
I think case studies, they have their own way of just letting someone know what you're capable of. And
Hmm.
with the recent test that we just did, and with all the case studies that I had to deal with. I mean, if I was hiring for a role, I've already seen the case study that is very practical, and I without even going much further, I know that, okay, from what this person has down, right? So they are capable of actually bringing something to the table from this case study. So I
Yeah.
think case studies are, just to add to what Molly said, a great way actually to showcase your skill if given the opportunity. All right, so we've come to the end of the series. Thank you very much, Molly. This has been a very fantastic space. Thank you for joining us. I mean, I learned a lot. And it's always a good thing, because there's always so much that you can learn, and knowledge that you can share with others. So thank you. I don't know if you have any other thing you want to share with us, but yeah, we've come to the end of the space. Thank you so much, Molly.
Yeah. No, thank you. And thank you everyone for taking the time to listen. I hope one little thing was helpful. And like
Mm-hmm.
I said, if you're here, you're already ahead of the game and you're doing a really good job. So yeah, you can be proud of yourself.
Yeah, there was surely something more. There was one thing for me from the space. I mean, it was a good space. Thank you very much. All right.
You're welcome.
Bye bye, everybody.